Frank Watson here with John Lowe and Tom Probasco, older gentlemen struggling with technology and the truth. So here we go. Oh,
We got
well,
fresh, we got medium, and got old age. You mean? But go ahead.
Tom is kind of he's just retired. He's not really old yet. You know, you got to be,
well,
Oh,
good.
he's fresh. He's freshman.
yeah.
And Frank, you're a sophomore,
There you go.
and I'm just a junior. Oh,
We don't have any seniors yet.
thank you, Tom.
Oh, goodness.
Anyway, that poem you gave last week, Tom, was very interesting to me. The bat poem and the bat in the cave. Do you remember?
Oh, yes, that poem, yes. Yeah, the mind in its purest play is like some bat.
Yes, and that opened up some interest to me because being in the cave and flying around in darkness and so forth reminded me of the cave of Plato,
Right.
who taught there was an entrance to the cave, and that was the light. And we are in our status of life are in the cave, and the light shines on one side of the cave, and that's we see our figures up there, and then we think that's reality. But he says really what we need to do is go to the entrance of the cave, and that's reality. And you know, when you spoke about the bat in the cave, that certainly popped out to me.
Yeah.
And so we have two different philosophies, and that's the importance of it. Now, you mentioned that the group that your wife belongs to, I believe you said, who they recite poetry all the time, you know, quite regularly. Or maybe
No,
that's
that's not. No, that's not. Yeah, Julia doesn't. Maybe.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Julia is not part of it. Julia is not particularly fond of poetry, having had some bad experiences in classes.
Oh, I see. Well, anyway, there were different interpretations of poetry, and this was one of them. And of course, I thought of the Plato imagery, and it shows how one's philosophy really affects how you interpret things. And so, to me, then it brings out to me postmodernism, a philosophy of postmodernism, uh, which I don't know if you picked up on that or not, of sort of a meaninglessness. So if you don't have a cave with a light at the one end, it's sort of flying around in sort of meaninglessness, trying to find its way, and yet doesn't seem to be any way. And
what is the poem we're referring to? Do you have a copy of it?
Oh, that's the one, Frank, I recited last week, Mind by Richard Wilbur.
Yeah.
oh,
Do you have a copy of it?
Well, I can pretty much tell you is mind in its purest play is like some bat that beats about in caverns all alone, contriving by a kind of senseless wit not to conclude against a wall of stone. It has no need to falter or explore. Darkly it knows what obstacles are there, and so may flit and weave, dip and soar in perfect courses through the blackest air. And the mind is like, has this simile, a like perfection? The mind is like a bat, precisely, save in the very happiest intellection, graceful error may correct the cave. That's the one that's John's referring to.
Okay, that's helpful. I could see how how John's mind went to Plato.
The allegory of the, yeah.
I think you memorized it rather well, Phil.
Yeah, that was good,
Yeah,
Tom.
it's one of my favorite poems that I
Yeah.
don't exactly. I like that poem, but it's not like, as I think I mentioned last, it's not like stopping by woods on a snowy evening, which seems, one of Frost's simpler. It's beautiful, and it's pretty easy to interpret. Mind is not really. I mean, you can interpret, what does he mean?
Yeah.
But I can certainly see why John thinks of Plato and his cave.
And then the idea of postmodernism too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, now, how do we define postmodernism?
Yeah,
Well,
good question.
that is a big question, I tell
Yeah.
you. And I've given a great deal of thought. I had some little notion of it before, and I've looked it up and tried to interpret it as best I can. And there's a lot there. Um, and there's a discipline. It's from French philosophy. One that's very prominent is Jacques Derrida, who came and taught at Yale, and but there are others as well. There's Foucault, and then there's Rorty, an American, and they question. And I think we all talked about certainty. What can we be certain of? And they will push very strongly. There's no certainty. There's no such thing as certainty. Very strong on that. And
Are they sure about that?
that is a good point, because it's a philosophy of itself. It's a contradiction. Because if you say there's no philosophy, then that's a philosophy. In other words, and so if there's no certainty, then that becomes a certainty, as you say, certainly.
Yeah.
And so I guess you could start with a philosophy that was raised way back with David Hume, and brought out more fully with Immanuel Kant. But anyway, what can we be certain of between the inner world, our inner world, and the outer world? The inner world and the outer world. And do we really know what the outer world is? Or is it mostly just subjective, something within us that we interpret onto the external world? I'll give you an example. You have a fireplace there, and you're sitting there and you're watching the fire. And what's your experience of the fireplace? Well, you see the flames rising above the logs, and the various colors, yellow and white, and you might see a little blue in there maybe, and so forth and so on. And now, are those colors in the fireplace? Or is that your experience of energy there? You get closer and you may see more, and you feel warmth. Now, is the warmth in the fireplace, or is it you? And you may get closer yet, and you could be burned. Is that the flame, or is it you? So you have the inner world and the outer world. How much of it do we impose on the outer world as our inner world? And if you push it far enough, it really, everything we experience is really within us. And the outer world is a mystery. Now, that was Immanuel Kant. Kant said the numinal that was within you, that's the real world. And the outer world, it's phenomenal, but we don't really know what it is out there. It's what we impose on it.
So if a tree falls in the forest,
You got it just right. Got it right, Frank. That's what you call idealism. So that's raising the question, well, what's certainty, you know? And then Hegel comes along. He says, yeah, but they're universals, and we all have the same kind of experiences, you know, so we can universalize it somewhat. And so take the color blue, you know, color, we talked about blue a minute ago, color blue. Can you explain the color blue?
For me, it's a matter of my wife says it's my best color. It brings out, it matches the color of my eyes. And I think, well, geez,
Whatever that is, you know. But it's your color blue.
I feel special when I wear blue.
Yeah. So. But you don't really know what that
fashion statement, you know.
You don't know what that experience really is, what her experience of it is, and what your experience and what Tom's experience of blue is. We just assume it's the same thing, you know. And that's what Hegel was saying. Well, there are these universal things that we just assume that's there, common sense, you know, and just follow that. But still, you can't ever be altogether certain. Question of certainty again. Well, then there's the problem of language. What about our words?
That's Tower of Babel stuff. I'm fascinated by that story, and when you stop and think about it, that is a kind of a almost philosophical statement in the form of a myth or a
all kinds of truths and myths, all kinds of truths and myths, all kinds.
Yes.
Tom, you're going to say something?
No, I just said it's a story, and that's the same thing.
Yeah.
Joseph Campbell is what makes me think of.
Power myth.
It's a powerful thing, though, because you know, the story of the people were building a tower to the sky, and God decided that they were getting above themselves and destroyed their ability to speak the same language. And that's a demonstrable fact. When you look at, for instance, Trump supporters and Kamala Harris supporters, obviously, what each of them sees and is just absolutely, and what they say just doesn't translate to the other side. They don't make sense to each other. And the same thing can be true of husbands and wives talking about what to have for dinner, or who's supposed to do the dishes, or I've never seen a situation, or I've never heard a statement so simple that it can't be misunderstood. And you know, that it's just amazing.
And of course, we have words and then experiences behind our words. My experience may be quite different from your experience, and a whole culture can be have its bearings, you might say, from historical settings. Cultures can differ, and so how can we explain and communicate with one another from one culture to the other? Even language, you know, all this business about the sports. Can't even think of the word. What is it? The sports today. What is that? It's not the aquarium. It's the word that comes out to me. In Paris, what is it? Can't even think of the word. My age.
We're talking about the Olympics.
The Olympics, the language, you know, it's interesting. All the countries. How they interpret one word for another and so forth. That's why I certainly couldn't have done better in Latin, but That's why Latin is useful, because it can relate a lot of things from one country to another because of that, because of the similarity of basic Latin and Greek too, for that matter. Well, anyway, then there's the question: is truth static or is it flowing? Is God being or is he becoming?
Have either of you are either of you familiar with a book entitled "The Name of the Rose"?
I've heard of it, but I have not read it.
I've heard of it too.
It deals with semiotics, and honestly, I tried reading it, and it was just a little too dense for me. But the meaning of meaning, you know, in language, we're off into the weeds here. It gets pretty hard to. I need a machete to cut my way through this.
Well, it makes me think of Bill Clinton. Define is.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I mean, you know. Oh well.
And he always says, "I feel your need."
Ah,
Well, I wonder if he does. Well, anyway, then this gets into the problem of evil, too. We raised that question. It's, I think we understand a little bit better moral evil, in that it's passed on from one person to another. The old idea of the fall. It's a little easier to understand why there are evils that come from human choices of freedom and so forth. But what about natural evil? The cosmos, chaos, earthquakes, tsunami, waves, diseases, viruses, so all that sort of thing. And we touched on that, I believe, and is there such a thing as an evil being or principality? St. Paul speaks about principalities, beings beyond ours that we don't understand, that implies that there's problems in the natural world, that were by the natural world, it groans, I think it's the word he uses, groans in anguish, the natural world. Well, anyway, I did want to sort of take this into art, because I think it might be a little easier to get it into art. And I will say that the whole postmodern approach is very liberal, very liberal. And this is why often it'll make us feel uncomfortable, because we do have a certain conservatism with us, and they will take it to its nth degree. But anyway, I think sometimes it's interesting to utilize art. I had taken some art all the way back in high school, and I remember the teacher used to tell me, she says, look for accidents. Look for accidents. Because when you first start in art, and if you want to say anything, because you're all getting involved in art and that sort of thing, to speak to this or not, but when you first get into doing art, you want to do it just like it is. You're very concise, and you want to be very correct to just as it is, realism, realism. And then you'll run up a teacher will say, well, it's too tight, it's too static, let it flow, and look for accidents. And I knew of one teacher said, instead of drawing what's there, draw or paint the background. Instead of the leaf, what's the background of the leaf? Do that first. Or paint it upside down. I knew of a paint artist. I don't know if we talked about the Black Curtain Theater. Did we talk about that once, or did we do that at down Talbot Square? There used to be an artist down there, and he put the easel on a rotating deal, and he'd paint as it rotated the easel.
Is that the guy that used to get up and dance sometimes?
Maybe he might have.
He did a sketch of me that I still have. It's on the cover of my collected songs.
Okay.
Oh, is that who we're talking about, Frank? That's on the songbook?
He was an artist that hung out at the Black Curtain.
This was
Well, it could have been. Could have been. This goes back.
we talking about this?
Yes.
Did he do that on a rotating?
No, I don't think so. It might have been two different people.
He would start off and paint, and then at the end of the dinner, it was a dinner theater thing. Well, he'd auction it off. Did he do that with you? No.
No, he just did that sketch and gave it to me.
Mhm.
I can't even read the name. Hyatt or Pyatt or
You told me. Let's see here. I might even at some point I wrote it down, and I'm just looking to see. Yeah, because I had to ask you, and you checked with somebody else.
yeah, probably Stan Smith.
That sounds right, but this is not Stan Smith. So, yeah, I've got it written down. I'll have to dig that up because I actually made a note of it somewhere for.
The signature used to be in the lower right-hand corner.
It's still there, but it's hard to. I mean, it's pretty clearly John, I think. Oh man, let's see.
It's like a lot of things in my life. You talk about your accidents appearing in art. There's a lot of accidents in my life, so probably in all of our lives, I guess.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
They don't go smoothly or clearly for the most part.
I think of accidents and mistakes.
Mhm.
Accidents and mistakes.
And you got to be careful, about when is something a mistake. If you make a wrong turn and you get lost, and you find something while you're lost that is of value, was it a mistake or something that was providential?
Well, this gets into whether it's process or whether it's, when you say providential, that means that God foreordained it somehow, huh?
If God ordained it, then it was.
Okay, see, this gets into traditional philosophy and theology and what you call process. And I moderate. Let me put it that way. I'm torn between the two, and I think you're. My problem, my throat. That's a little bit of accident there. But anyway, traditional philosophy would say God is absolute, perfect, unending, unchangeable, unfeeling. Everything's all, what would you say, predestined, foreknown.
But while you're pondering that, I found the name.
Yeah, what's the name?
And we'll get back to that. John Higar, Higar.
Higar.
You checked with somebody. Higar, and it's AKA Billy Joe Rainbow.
And what's that? Is that his name?
Yeah.
Well, that's what he went by, also known as Billy. I mean, I'm sure that John Higar was his name, but he also went by. I got this from whoever you checked with, Frank.
Yeah. Okay. Well, he was nice enough to do that drawing and give it to me.
Yeah, it makes a good cover. But anyway, back to I interrupted because I found that and I wanted to.
His name was Rainbow. It makes him very colorful. Maybe that's why he wrote.
A very good name for an artist of some kind.
He was colorful.
But getting back to foreordained or not, so that's the
Ordained.
traditional way of looking at it. And
Fixed.
then the other point of view is process. And then the great philosopher is Alfred North Whitehead.
Uh-oh.
And of course goes back to the Greek philosopher Thales, I'm sorry. So it's nothing new. You find something always back there with the Greek philosophers, because they thought about everything. But at any rate, process could either be seen, as you point, as I'm torn to traditional philosophy and theology, or in a way more biblical. You could find in the Bible both ways. You can find God being changeless and and all that, and also, but he changes his mind here, and he does here, and he does this, and he feels this way, and he feels that way, almost like a human being, anthropomorphized the divine. So you can find support with it both ways. But there'll be some process philosophers who say this really closer to the Bible, that God does change himself. He's processed. He's not just being, he's becoming. And so it's a new notion maybe for some of us. And something I've toyed with now. There's some evangelical now who sound very fundamentalist, who are now saying, when God, and also there's a new philosopher, or some groups of philosophers that are Muslim, who teach this too, that God, when he created, he entered into time. So here, God in all perfection and so forth, but when he entered into time, or you could say God can limit himself. Now, that's a question. God is all powerful, so can he limit himself? Therefore, if he can he enter into time, in which would, therefore, he would become a process. He would become process with it. In which case, if he gives you freedom, you would have radical freedom. He doesn't know what you're going to think or say or decide. You don't know that. He doesn't know that, because he's going to give you radical freedom. Doesn't mean you're free on everything, but certain points. Something to think about. Also, is there chaos? Does he allow chaos in the universe? Or is there a spiritual principle? And St. Paul speaks about principles and principalities that go beyond, in the very creative process itself, whereby we have earthquakes and viruses and all this sort of thing. That we have a good world, but it's not perfect, because it's on a process of becoming what? Yes.
It reminds me, and maybe it doesn't relate, but when you're saying these things, it reminds me of Einstein's statement that God does not play dice with the universe.
Well, that's right. And see, that's one of the problems with Einstein, because he felt of a steady state view of the world, and he does not hold to God as we think of God, but he thinks there's a mind behind all intelligibility, mathematics and all that. There must be something beyond all of that behind him.
Yeah.
And that's rather static. So see,
yeah, right.
Static. And so quantum physics comes along and says, but wait a minute, there's probability, and there's novelty and change, and something contradictory in the very nature of things, atoms and quarks and all that don't quite fit the big picture of, say, Newton. Newton had all these laws figured out, and so you have two different worlds that conflict there.
Well, there used to be the view that the world would expand and then contract And now physicists say, most of them, I think, it will expand forever.
Well, yes.
And I find the contrast in those two views has an effect on me I can't even define.
Well, that's where your entropy comes in too. You see, it goes out further and further and further, more and more dispersed. And
Yeah.
now
What's
Penrose, who engineered with, get these names mixed up, Stephen Hawking's,
Oh
the
yeah.
collegiate. They engineered together the singularity of the beginning of the big universe, the Big Bang. It has
Singular.
to start there.
Yeah.
And there it went out further and further and further. Well, now, was that the beginning? You know, religionists who would hold to, now you can be religious and hold to both big bang, big beginning as well as process. There's process in Genesis. There's reason to believe in the beginning there was already a void, what was like a watery something or other, you know. So you could argue process and beginnings at the same, so you can't tie it up. But if you want to take the beginning things, the Big Bang, that would support that. But then what about entropy? It goes on further, further out, further. Now Penrose thinks that eventually as the photons go, that's where you end up with photons. It's just light energy. Eventually will then recede and go back the other way. And the process would start on, or maybe a new beginning starts way out there. How he figures it.
Yeah. Hmm.
That kind of explains some
Well, okay. Now you see what philosophy needs to do is trying to do is to make sense of what science is telling us. And science has its own philosophy. And there are philosophers of science, and some will say, oh, it's all material. It's all just blind chance. And then you have someone like Penrose that said, but wait, he's a mathematician at the highest level, Penrose. He'll say mathematics is something we don't create. It's something that's there. We discover it, and it's infinite, absolute certainty. But then you have what you call fractal in mathematics. Have you heard of that? Fractal,
Yes.
Fractal.
Fractals. Indefinite edges.
Yeah, lightning, water that's tributaries that create a river. There are principles they follow. Lightning follows a certain pattern, a certain code, as the rivers do. With all the brokenness, there's a predictability there.
Yeah.
A balance. There's the royal, let's see the royal code. The royal code. And look it up if you want to. I think it's the royal stuff, the royal the golden rule, the golden rule.
Is it golden knot?
No, it's the golden ratio. That's it.
Oh,
Golden ratio.
I have heard of that.
All right. 1 and 1. Now, this sounds weird. Incidentally, you remember the slang word back a ways was all that's awesome. How many kids used to say that's awesome?
Oh, that's said all the time now.
Well, it's something. The new ones, though, the new one is it's weird. That's
Well,
the new
that has
stuff.
arisen for other reasons.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
they're saying that the golden ratio is weird.
Well, no, it's well in a way it is but it's very systematic. 1 and 1 is 2, right? 2 and 1 make 3. Okay? Or 2 and 1 make 3. Then add the next one up. 3 and 2, taking 1 before that is 2. Wait, 3 and 2 is 5. And 5 and 3 is 8. 8 and 5 is 13. 13 and 5, going back again,